Is it Mazda 3 or Mazda 3? Yeah, we'll go with that one. Mazda 3 is just weird, isn't it?
Zoom, zoom, zoom.
So this week we're in a plain old family hatchback. Remember them? I know, right? This non-crossover isn't even a crossover. It's just a plain old 5-door family hatchback, like the sort of car that you used to buy if you wanted a family car back in the day. How very early 2000s.
Keep on rolling, baby. You know what time it is.
Of course, what that means is that you're not sat like 10 foot off the road. And these days, now that everybody else is driving an SUV type car, that comes with certain tangible risks, like being flattened by somebody carelessly reverse parking a Nissan Juke, for example. Seriously though, crossovers do get a lot of stick from people like me, but actually if you've been driving one for a bit and then you go back into a standard hatchback, you do get a pretty stark reminder of why they're so popular. It feels a bit cramped in here. It isn't. I mean, there's plenty of headroom and there's lots of leg room front and back, but the fact that you're sat quite low and it's quite dark in here and the rear visibility is quantifiably crap, that all combines to make it feel a little bit claustrophobic. Let's look at this in a bit more detail. The rear visibility thing is because in an effort to make this stylish, lead designer San, whoever he is, has given this a high-waisted tailgate and a shallow rear screen and really big fat C-pillars, which make over-the-shoulder visibility dreadful. Like you could lose a televangelist's company vehicle in the blind spot.
Televangelist Jesse Duplantis says God told him he needs the new Falcon 7X jet.
That if Jesus was physically on the earth today, he wouldn't be riding a donkey.
To be fair, he is right about that. Although I think Jesus would have a crossover, similar sort of high up driving position as a donkey, but plenty of room in the back for disciples or lepers or whatever. You just can't replicate the feeling of space that you get in a tall crossover in a low hatchback like this, short of making it impractically long.
It's okay! I'm a limo driver!
So I guess the tow truck will just lift it up and just back it down the road.
Right, this is really bad. I'm starting to convince myself, it seems, that these crossover things are actually really good. Hang on, I'm gonna have to go and drive this again. If I can get the door open. And there it is. If a family hatchback can't replicate the feeling of space that you get in a crossover, then a crossover definitely can't replicate the feeling of driving a really well sorted out family hatchback, which this is. Honestly, from this seat here, this thing is absolutely lovely. Phew, for a second there, it felt like I was being overtaken by some sort of crossover demon.
Me and the devil had a tussle, but I won now.
Driving the Mazda 3, anyway. Let's do the good stuff first. Now I know it's really boring talking about car platforms, but we are gonna, so strap in. A while ago, the Mazda 3 was on a platform that was shared with the Ford Focus and co-developed with Ford, among others. Now that was advantageous because the Focus has always been nestled near the top of the dynamic tree, and it followed that the Mazda 3 felt like an apple that hadn't fallen far from that tree. And I haven't really thought this metaphor through properly, but you get what I'm saying, right? The 3 was really good to drive in a way that felt quite similar to a Ford Focus. Now that platform thing hasn't been the case for a while now, since the last Mazda 3 actually, but what's funny is this new one, which has nothing to do with Ford, still has an echo of the Focus about the way it drives. It's the sort of experience that you feel immediately comfortable with. It's natural and it's sharp without being unyielding. It gives you feel but without punching you in the back, and that's a quality that's shared with the Focus. It's like if you imagine a Caterpillar boot but with a Nike Air sole. It's that sort of thing. Specifically, it pulls off that trick of being very easy and non-intimidating to drive, but also being very dynamically accomplished. I guess the best word for it is composure. Like, it doesn't roll much, it tells you what's going on, it turns in a way that's predictable and not darty, and the steering is kind of direct, but it's not artificially weighted. So that means it tells you what the front wheels are doing, but also it's not a pain in the arse when you're just going about your day-to-day stuff. Same with the suspension, it communicates with you, but it does it without being really harsh and annoying. You can make it understeer quite easily, especially if it's wet because it's front wheel drive, but generally it has loads of predictable grip, although it does also have a surprising occasional propensity for lift-off oversteer, which is quite good fun. Did I just say lift-off oversteer? Okay, it's time to move on. To the cabin! Do the Batman thing there. This is absolutely lovely. Well, it's not lovely, but it's impressive. It's neat and tidy and it's intuitive, and almost all of the surfaces are soft, touchy-feely. Pretty much everything apart from the door pockets. Door pockets that are canny big, that is, but not as big as the glovey, which is like proper bin-sized, massive. There's even this tiny little pocket next to the steering wheel, like Mazda's thought really hard about using all the available space. What I'm basically saying is that this interior is delightfully non-Japanese. I mean, it's a bit colourless, it's all the same shade of dark grey, but compared to the Honda Civic's aging mess of a cabin, this is like a piece of postmodern art. Also the infotainment screen, which sadly isn't a touchscreen, but as far as things that are controlled by a rotary dial go, it's actually very intuitive and non-frustrating. And the screen is really sharp and clear. Add to that a driving position that is just brilliant, low like a sports car, really good pedal feel, and a semi-digital instrument panel that's big and bright and bold, and this is just a solid piece of work. Mazda actually calls it a human-centric cabin, so that's good. You might laugh, but some driving positions do seem to have been developed without any reference to the human form whatsoever. Citron. Anyway, the 3 here is really good, but it's not perfect. Yeah, with all this ostensible greatness, it doesn't have much sparkle. Now I know it's a bit of a minefield talking about abstract concepts like feel, because that's a very personal thing, but I have to say that while I love driving this, it still somehow all feels a bit clinical and it makes me feel a bit cold. What it boils down to is if somebody asked me what family hatchback they should buy, this isn't the first one that would jump to mind, I'm afraid to say. Firstly, I think it looks a bit boring. Bit frumpy-arsed. Now we don't need to dwell on that, it's just what I think, and you can call me names underneath if you disagree. More objectively, Mazda has tangibly put more thought into the front part of the cabin than it has everything back over. So like the boot is perfectly acceptable in terms of its outright literage, but if you look at it compared to the last car I reviewed, the Volkswagen T-Cross, which don't forget is Volkswagen's smallest crossover, the Mazda 3 loses big, not only in volume terms, but just in those little flourishes that make a car boot much more pleasant to live with. So in the Mazda 3's boot, you're dropping your stuff really low over a big lip, and it's just a crappy piece of carpet on the bottom, and there's no compartments underneath it, you can't lift it up, and you can't slide the seats backwards and forwards in this like you can in that. Whereas the T-Cross boot and the boots of quite a lot of these crossover type cars feel like they've been really well thought out. This just feels like a big space in the back of the car. The rear seats fall down, obviously, but generally this is another win for the crossover over the family hatchback. However, you'll struggle to find a crossover that's as refined as this. It cuts through the air with an unflustered quietness that's just really rare in a big, boxy, bouncy SUV-shaped thing. If this is a fun car to drive, it's also a lovely thing just to sit in and go down the motorway for a long period of time. The refinement is also in large part because of the engine, of course, which in this case is a petrol. And it too, like the car itself, dishes out a mixed bag of emotion. See, where most manufacturers are downsizing to small capacity turbo engines, Mazda stuck with something slightly old school. It's a non-turbo 2-litre. It's an unusual decision really, because both on paper and on the road, it feels kind of dated already.
My current company car is a 2-litre LS. It's got 3 thumpingly good points. Twin overhead cam, 16-valve, fuel-injected engine. One of those features alone would be enough to make a rep excited.
I'll give you an example. Now, it is another Volkswagen example, but there you go. But if you compare this to a similarly powered 1.5-litre turbo engine in a Golf, you'll see that the Mazda engine is way down on economy. And also, the VW one just feels much quicker because the turbo gives it much more torque lower down in the rev range. Yeah, it's just not very inspirational. It's at odds with the cabin, which feels really modern. You put it 1 gear too high and put your foot down, it's just like going through treacle while it works up the rev range. It's horrible. I'm reliably informed that the diesel is a lot better, which makes sense because it's got so much more torque, which means it'll be that much more flexible, which you can read all about if you go to this car's review at HonestJohn.co.uk. I'll put a link below. There is also a more powerful petrol engine coming very soon, and a really interesting one at that, because it uses compression combustion like a diesel engine, which Mazda says gives it amazing efficiency with the sort of low down torque characteristic that you get with a diesel, but presumably without as much of the horrible clatter. Right, we've been going on for ages. Oh well, I guess that means I can skip all the boring stuff about the spec and that. What I will say very quickly is that unsurprisingly, this is about on par with all the other family hatchbacks you can buy, albeit the price does start a little bit higher than some others because of the paucity of engine choice. Now that might change in the future, there might be some lower powered entry-level engines come, but for the moment, the base model Mazda 3 is very well equipped. It's also 5-star safe because it gets loads of active and passive safety stuff. It will doubtless prove very reliable because the last one largely did, and it comes with fixed price servicing. Ultimately, it's a pretty sensible and very reasonable place to put your money. Big question then, should you actually do that? No, but look, this is very good, right? Lovely cabin, dead refined, does all of the hatchbacky things pretty well, and it is great to drive. But it's the sort of car that I would tell somebody to try rather than giving them a straight, like, you should buy this sort of recommendation. Personally, I think I'd still have a Leon, even though that's getting really old now, or a Peugeot 308, which I just think is much more interesting than this. Or a Golf. But really, if I was talking to somebody who's not that bothered about the B-road stuff, which let's face it is most car buyers, I'd tell them to go and look at a crossover. So there you go. Thanks for watching. Don't know why I did that. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Please look at our other videos. They're really good fun. And I will see you soon. Cheers. Bye. I'll tell you something that made us laugh. So I was so bamboozled by the screen that it took us ages to notice that this has actually got a CD player. They've like shoved it under the switchgear like they're slightly embarrassed by it. And a thing from the 90s.